How you feeling, man?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. So it's a nice warm December day. So
Staying busy?
hmm and like I said, I'm down at the job site right now. So
I'm sure you are, man. I'm sure you
mhm.
are. A big inspiration, man. Real
Hey.
estate extraordinaire, Mr. Erik Manley. Listen,
Mhm.
like I told you already, man, this YouTube channel is basically to explain different topics, bring knowledge, so a third grader can understand it, So
100%.
I appreciate you on so many different levels, and I wanted to pick your brain for a minute and get some of that knowledge and share it with some of the people that's watching. So one of the first things I wanted to ask you, you being a mortgage broker and
Yep.
an investor, tell me what inspired you to get into this industry. Like, what was one of the first things that inspired you?
Well, so like I think when I was telling you before, Brandon, so like I went to tech school, like I started out as a mechanic. My whole family was always blue collar and and I still have that in my blood and I love getting my hands dirty and doing all that, but when you look at it, it was hard to get away, you wear your body out, you're working long hours and retirement is, you don't know if you're going to have enough at the end.
Right.
So I started in the beginning and I got on bigger pockets and, just kind of tried to learn as much as I could. And that's why I like to give back and, talk to, guys like you and your audience, because when I first started, I didn't know which way to start, you know? So I started, house hacking a multifamily with a not necessarily a construction loan, but a renovation loan. And then from there, I learned more and more. I did a flip. And then at that point, it made sense for me to graduate to new construction. And here I am 3 properties later.
Hold on,
You
slow
know,
down, slow down. So you did what was your first one that you did?
so the first one I did what's called an FHA 203K loan, which is the
Okay.
first time home buyer loan. It's an FHA. It's the same thing as regular FHA, but they give you the money to buy the property and the money to fix it up.
Okay. The money to buy it and fix it up. So what's the
Mm-hmm.
stipulations on that?
So on that, it's the same thing, right? If you qualify for FH, like let's just say based on the first thing you're going to do with any kind of loan, right? Whether it's a regular mortgage, a renovation mortgage, or whether it's a new construction mortgage, is you have to look at your income statements. So that means if you're a W-2 employee, you need your pay stubs and you need your pay stubs, you need your W-2, so you figure out how much you make. If you're self-employed, you need your tax returns. And then based on that, we'll take an estimate of the taxes and the insurance for the type of property you're trying to buy, and we'll say, okay, you can afford up to 300,000, right? You can afford up to 400,000, and then that's how right, whether it's a regular FHA or it's going to be a renovation FHA. As long as you're under that income level, the same thing all qualifies. It still follows FHA guidelines. If you do, FHA renovation, it still follows conventional guidelines. It's basically a regular FHA or a regular conventional loan, and then they piggyback the construction part on the top of it. So
Okay.
if you qualify,
Add
so
on
if you, mhm. So if you qualify for an FHA, you qualify for an FHA, renovation.
203. Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
That makes sense. And it's just basically an add-on for the
Correct.
construction.
Yep. Mhm.
Okay.
All it's exactly the same, and then they just in the underwriting they just add on all the contractor and all that kind of stuff on top of the regular FHA mortgage.
So tell me your thought process behind why you went to build initially versus buying.
So I think what it came to is in the very beginning, you know, I wasn't 100% ready to jump into new construction because, like I said, I didn't have anybody to teach me. And at the time, back when I got started in like 2016, 2017, in Connecticut, at least, we were just kind of recovering from we were recovering from, like still the Great Recession, 2008. There was still tons of foreclosures on the market, which that's not the case anymore. So nobody was really doing new construction, and you couldn't, you know, you could find tons of like carpenters and flooring guys and electricians, but there really wasn't a lot of general contractors except for people that were doing like custom built houses.
Right.
So at the time, I started out, I kept getting outbid by, it was funny because like now a lot of your clients are probably getting outbid by cash buyers right now.
Yeah.
It was the same thing in like 2016 or 2017, but it was different because you would find, any house that was like just needed like paint and like cabinets.
Yeah.
Those were the ones that the investors with the cash were coming in and getting. So like all the easy ones.
The same thing
So
right now.
it's the same. That's why it's funny. Like when we look at the housing market, it's definitely different than it was back then, but it always rhymes, right?
Right, right.
So basically what it came down to was at the time, I was like 23, 24. I must have looked at probably 7 or 8 different properties at the time. I got outbid on all of them, and I was just kind of getting discouraged because every time I found a house, I was just wasting my time. I was putting in an offer and I was getting outbid. So I basically came up with the crazy idea where I was like, you know what? There's too much competition. So I'm going to go where there's no competition.
There you go.
And a lot of these houses, they were old anyway. A lot of the houses, they were old anyway. They needed a lot of work. Right. So at that point, it was like, I might as well just buy something that's, in the nice area. Cause that's the other thing. Like I remember you were saying too, is like, where do you know where to buy? Right.
Yeah.
You want to make sure you don't want to spend too much money in a house or an area where you're not going to want to live, or, you don't spend $400,000 on a neighborhood where the house is only going to be worth 300.
Of course.
So a lot of times that comes into. So I just looked for houses in nice areas where I would want to live, where something that had good bones.
Yeah.
And then I went in and I turned it into like, again, like I started out as a landlord doing that, because I house hacked it, which I think you've probably talked about before, where you only got to put 3.5% down. You live in one side, rent the other side out.
Right.
And a lot of these older houses, they only have two bedrooms, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what the renovation loans allow you to do is you take a house that has decent square footage, but it's got a bad layout. That's the number one value add with any of these, projects.
Yep.
Is you want to look for like bad layouts. Can you turn a 2-bedroom into a 3? Can you turn a 2-bedroom into a 4? Because at the time, that was the difference between getting $1,400 a month in rent versus getting, $2,000 a month in rent. And you're putting up some walls and a couple closets. So those are the things that a lot of first-time home buyers are, you don't have to completely renovate something.
The whole house. Yeah, the whole house.
Yeah.
Like this co-op that I actually accepted an offer on, a cash loan, but people have not a cash loan, a cash offer.
Yep.
People have to they have to renovate the whole house, But,
yep. And that's where a 203 would come in handy. Now, at the same time, though, too, did you say it was a co-op or was it a condo?
Co-op. It's a co-op.
So co-ops, if you probably know, co-ops are very tricky to get financing on.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And as
we just went cash.
Yeah, because that's kind of almost why they go for lower prices, because the financing like overlays and contingencies.
Yeah.
So, but again, for the right buyer, if you're in the right situation, they work out great. You can get in for a low, where else are you going to have, like that low of a payment, for a lot of, exactly.
For something decent, at least. So staying on that subject, what type of loans could you get for new construction? You already explained the 203. Is there anything else that you could get for new construction?
Yep. So the 203
that makes sense.
Yep. So there's basically going to be 4 main ones, right? Well, or three main ones. So on the renovation side, you're going to have the 203K, which is the FHA version.
Yep.
And that's 3.5% down on any 1 through 4 unit property. It doesn't have to just be a single family. Then you have the home side, and you have to live in, like, for these loans I'm talking about right now, you have to intend to live in at least one of the units, and you only have to live there for a year.
Yep.
If you live there for a year and then you decide to leave, then you can turn it into a rental. But you have to, at the time that you buy it, you have to intend to live there for a year, or else it's considered mortgage fraud. Now,
and at least one of the units.
Yeah, just one of the units, and you live there for a year. You don't have to refinance it to leave. Yeah, you can keep your 30-year mortgage. You live in it for a year. The next 29 years, you can keep, because you're always going to have a lower interest rate and a lower down payment with the owner occupied loans that you live in versus second homes and investment properties.
Right.
So now the conventional cousin, right, to the 203K is they call it the home style. And it's exactly the same as except, it's conventional. So the mortgage insurance, you don't have the upfront mortgage insurance and all that. So 90% of the time, if your credit score is above 700, you try to go conventional. If it's below, 700, but if it's below 700, then a lot of times you're going to want to go FHA, unless if there's certain things like structural issues. But we don't have to get too much into that. Now, those are straight renovations. So that's an existing property. You could basically knock the thing down to the foundation, fix the foundation, and rebuild basically a new house. But those are renovation loans for things that are already existing, right? A lot of times, like the joke is you have to leave one wall,
I hear
so
you.
people so now new construction, the main one that people are going to run into is going to be conventional. It's going to be very hard to do an FHA new construction loan. There is a VA one, that I know of. A lot of lenders, a lot of stuff's been changing, as you know, like, the last year with lending, with them adding programs and stopping programs and all that kind of stuff. Yep. So as of now, that I know of, the ones that you can, actively get is going to be the conventional new construction, one. And that's basically, 1 through 4 unit properties, 5% down, same thing, you're going to live in it, right? They do have them for second homes and investment properties, but at the same time, that's not going to be 5% down, and it's going to be a much, much higher rate if it's a second home or an investment property.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
So, but they do have regular new construction. It's a conventional loan and it's 5% down. It's basically the same thing. It's the same structure as the renovation ones. Like your first step, what I always tell everybody is you have to find the contractor first. Well, first you come in, you get pre-approved for whatever, 300, 400, 500, 250, whatever, what your number is. Then before you go any further, you got to find a contractor.
You gotta know somebody in advance.
Yeah, or at least get it lined up. Like say, hey, I'm pre-approved for this amount. See, ask around, see if there's any builders, see if they have plans, right? Because a lot of times they build the same house over and over and over again, right. Or they'll have like 5 houses that are basically like value houses. Because that's the whole thing. Like it's, especially if you're going to try to start, especially now with the materials, and the prices and the labor prices that have been going up. If you're doing like a custom built house, it's going to be very hard to plan because, prices are moving. They're not as bad as they were the last like 2 or 3 years, but a lot of times it would be safer, especially if you don't have any construction knowledge, to go with basically like a generic plan that like a builder has that they've done multiple times.
Rinse and repeat.
Exactly.
So speaking on that again, so what's the difference between building now versus building back then? Like, considering the lumber costs after the pandemic, and even you said you bought in 2017?
2017, yes.
Yeah, so it's been a while now, so that's a whole different world from now.
I feel like that was 30 years ago compared to,
right.
It's crazy. But I mean, everything goes in cycles, right? So like where we're at now, I'm even starting to see some certain things change, but it's always evolving. Like, so take for instance, when I first started in 2017, you could find a lot of contractors, right? Because again, we were coming out of the Great Recession. So a lot of people were hungry for work. Like if you came and you could give them consistent work, or you had bigger jobs, like they would jump on it and they would give you a good price because they were doing a lot in one place. Yeah. Same thing. The materials were, compared to now, the materials were very affordable.
Right.
And at the same time, you could walk into Home Depot or Lowe's or, any of the lumber yards or anything like that. And they had pretty much everything you could possibly need in stock on the
It's
shelf.
not. Yeah, and
Yeah,
now
like
it's a little different, right?
yeah, so like now like the big thing is windows. And the first thing that you'd always check with your contractors and especially electricians is your electrical meter. That's the thing right now. Last time I checked, like I just went through a lot of hoops for that. And they're like anywhere from 38 to 52 weeks out. So if you
Wow.
don't get, yeah, exactly. So that's why if you're gonna start, whether it's a renovation or it's a new construction, and for those who don't know what the actual meter is, that's basically on the outside of your house where the pole connects to it, where it's got the, like the electrical meter, like the circle gauge in there,
Yep.
where that attaches to the outside of the house. That right there, that box, you could build everything, but if you can't hook up the power to the pole,
Then what are you really doing?
then what are you really doing? So that's why that and Windows are the first thing that you order, because Windows are getting better, but a lot of times, if you're ordering a decent amount, sometimes they're anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks out. I've had them even up to 10 to 12 weeks out. So, you
Yeah,
know,
I
it's
was
little.
looking at a house and somebody basically they was in love with the house until we started
Mhm.
talking about the windows. And
Yeah,
one of the rooms had like a bunch of windows, and it was just
yeah.
kind of scared him away. So
And that's the thing. Like, you might be able, like, if you've got like one or two here or there, or if it's a common size, sometimes you get lucky and you can find them in Home Depot or Lowe's and stuff
yeah,
like that. Especially if you don't care about them. Like, I'll be honest with you, if it's a renovation, as long as they're like good windows,
yeah,
right, like decent windows, and you put them not right next to each other, like you put them on like one side of the house and then around the corner,
yeah,
as long as they're not side by side, a lot of times you won't tell that they're not exactly the same brand. You know what I'm
mm,
saying?
yeah,
So now that could get you out of a pinch. Now, you don't want to do that if you don't have to,
yeah.
but
No, this situation that they were looking at was the
yeah,
window panes were like big
yeah,
windows in a
yeah.
room, and like it was like a sunroom, and like the windows
Hmm.
were like extruded, and
Yep.
yeah, it was a lot. Let me plug my
Mhm.
computer.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, but that was that. But
Mhm.
there's always something, that you have to look into when you're thinking of new construction. You gotta like think ahead, and that's kind of
Yeah, and
what I'm getting from
and
you.
and the main thing here is for the reality of it is if you don't have a construction background, even if you have a construction background, it's changed so much to where realistically, if you're going to do it, what you really need to focus is ask out, like good referrals from people who have like good builders, and the builder will most likely be able to handle 90% of this. That's why it's kind of like picking the right realtor, picking the right home inspector, picking the right lender, like
Yeah,
same thing, like hiring the right employee, right? If you hire the right person, then they'll know what to look out for. They do this all the time. They're in the trenches every day. Because if not, you could get, especially with the excavation, hooking up to the water, utilities are a massive thing. So if you don't know how your town operates with utilities, and then all of a sudden you find out you get the quote for the sewer and it's only, 7,000, and then you go and you find out when you pull the permit that you have to pay a sewer tap fee to the town of Stratford for another $7,000 just to hook up. Things like that can pop up very, very quick. You
yeah,
know, you
yeah,
start digging, you start digging and you got to bring in fill because the soil is a different kind. It can get, a renovation. Okay, maybe you go $15,000 over budget. New construction, if the water main isn't right in front of the house, or if they got to extend it, or
yeah. I've heard.
like they got to bring electrical out, or like little things like that. I mean, I say little, you're not going $15,000 over budget. You might end up, 20, 30, 40, 50,
Yeah,
60, 100. And it,
something
so
something as little as extending, the water main or whatever. Yeah, I've heard a
yeah,
lot.
It cost me like $35,000 on the last house.
Exactly. I've
Exactly.
heard stories of that. Is there any way to avoid that? Because I was going to ask, you just
Well,
explain this kind
well,
of like,
that's the main thing, right? Like, make sure that if you're going to do new construction, new construction is definitely for 99% of people not a do-it-yourself thing, right? So that's going to be hiring a builder, that has done new construction, that you can see they have reviews, they have, like you could talk to other people that have built with them,
yeah,
and they do this every day, so they're going to know. They'll be able to come out to the site, they'll be able to look at that, and they'll be able to tell you what's going to be a problem, so that, because that's the whole point, you don't know
they'll
what you
know.
don't know,
Yeah,
you know
they'll
so
know from their experience,
yeah.
right?
So what's that?
Because they'll be knowing from their experience
it,
of doing
it,
prior, work.
it,
Like they'll have
it,
all
it,
the answers.
Exactly, because that's the thing, is they know what to plan for, because that's what they do every day, and they've run into these. At the end of the day, you learn from two ways: your mistakes or somebody else's mistakes.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
when you learn by your mistakes, it's very expensive. So
yeah, yeah.
that's why, like when you call, somebody that's done it before, you're either their mistakes or people they've seen and watched make the mistakes. So
Is
the,
there a better time to buy or a better time to build, like season wise? Is that a such thing?
So, so there's the thing, right? So there's two ways to do, like a new construction loan, right? You can either buy the lot, right? They call it a new construction purchase, right?
Hmm.
Which is where you buy the lot and then you start the construction right away, right? Like, you don't own the lot, right? Then there's what they call a construction refinance, which is if you already own the land, then you basically can go, either, let's just say you own the loan free and clear,
Hmm.
you can basically refinance and get the loan to to start building on the property, right?
Okay.
Or new construction purchase, you're actually buying the land and putting the money for the construction, all at once. Now, me and you, we're predominantly in Connecticut, so
Right.
we're building in the Northeast. I'm going to
Mhm.
tell you right now, you are not breaking ground in the winter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, like, you usually want to, so if you do your paperwork, you meet with the engineers, you do, like with the architects, if you're going to do all that kind of stuff, you know, doing that through the winter to get all that lined up and going through permitting and all that, because every town's different too. Like Stratford is usually, like, I love Stratford. That's where I do, all of my building so far.
Hmm.
And, like, they're very, very fair, as long as you do everything you're supposed to.
Hmm.
But I've heard of other towns, in the surrounding area where, you know, they'll 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 give you a hassle, right? Like,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
it's not, you might not, like, so if you're expecting to get permits in 3 weeks, it might take longer than that.
Not work.
Especially if you got to have something get reviewed, or, like, again, because you have your site plans, which,
Yeah.
again, your engineer and your builder should help you with all this, understanding the setbacks and, what you can build. Um, but that's the main thing. You want to break ground, I would say, between March and June, if you can.
Okay.
You
That
know,
makes sense.
So,
That's
like,
good.
August the latest, because, like, one of my friends, he actually broke ground on he's doing two new construction duplexes around the corner, and he just broke ground, like, 2 weeks ago, and it's, luckily, the ground hasn't frozen yet,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's the main thing. But at the same time, is, his guys are going to be framing, and if you get snow or whatever,
It's gonna be
that's
tough.
it. You
Yeah.
gotta wait. So it's
Exactly.
like, and it's not that it should matter, but let's be honest, we're all human.
Hmm.
In the winter, if your guys are working and they're cold, we're gonna all slow down.
It's gonna be dragging. It's gonna
We're
be.
dragging, man. It's cold,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Coffee
and
break every 5 minutes.
and the same thing also with the street too, right? Like, the asphalt plants are closing, like, this week or next week.
Okay.
So if you got to put your driveway in, or, like, unless if it's an emergency, they're not opening up a street. to hook up the water, the sewer, if you have underground electrical or anything like that, which normally you won't, right? But the main things is the gas line, the water line, and the sewer. They're not doing that, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. So
So,
give me your thought process on when you build new construction, right? What's the thought
yeah.
process of like going into it as if you want to build it to sell it, if you're gonna build
Hmm.
it to live there, or if you're gonna build
Yeah.
it to rent it? Like, is there those are three different approaches? Is it like a
Hmm.
reason you could do it? Is it just your finances, or what's your thought process behind that?
Yeah. But for the most part, I mean, first part comes out to like right now, the reason that I'm doing the new construction is because like we all know the inventory issue, right?
Yeah,
Like that's the whole reason I started doing this because I'll be honest with you, if I could find something for a good price, what I wanted, you know, then I would buy it. But the issue is there's nothing out there.
yeah,
So when you can't, so the whole it's basically the mantra is, if you can't find anything to buy, then you got to build it yourself, kind of thing.
So
So and that
for
that's as simple
building,
that's as simple as my brain worked on that.
yeah,
Um, and it just came down to is like same thing. Like I said, I started out at the beginning, I was working a regular 9 to 5, like doing that as a mechanic for years, and then on the side, I was building these rentals with the idea that one day, like I was going to be doing, real estate full time, like I am now,
yep,
and that was the whole thing. Like in the beginning, you need a place to live, right?
right,
So like, are you going to live in it or going to rent it? Well, where you living now, right? So if you're renting, then a lot of times it makes sense to, and you're going to get the best terms anyway, is house hacking, you know? So or like I said, you can do a single family too. There's a lot of people where they just want their house to be a certain way. They
yep,
want it in a certain area. So it doesn't always have to be, I'll always be biased towards multifamilies because that's how I started and that's what I own.
yeah,
But I know tons of people that, hey, I want to buy a house in Orange, or North Haven, or like because it's got a good school system, or it's whatever, right? Or I want to buy, somewhere, that's close to family, right?
mhm,
Or they want to be in Fairfield because it's down by the beach, right?
yeah,
There's tons of places where you can go in and you can build, or you know what? Hey, a lot of people don't need a 1,600, 1,800 square foot home
yeah,
if it's a first house, you
right,
know? So if they already have the land, right? Like let's just say they inherited the land from family or something like that. What they could do is they can build a small little starter home on it,
yeah,
you know, like a small little single family home. you know you might be able to do some painting yourself or stuff like that, but again, you have the land, you go in, you build a small little, 1,100 to 1,200 square foot house,
yeah,
right? And for the average person, a lot of people are happy with that, and you build the house you want. It's all brand new. You're not going to have a lot of maintenance, like all the houses now with the energy codes, with the insulation, it's not going to cost you a lot to heat it,
right.
and cool it in the winter. And that's where you could see some people doing it too. So it doesn't always have to be multis, but you
It
know
comes down to necessity. Like
that,
whatever.
that that's what it comes. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
if you have the land and you have the opportunity, you could do it
Yeah.
there. It makes
Hmm.
sense. Or if you know that we need it out here, like what you're doing, and there's a lack of
Hmm.
inventory, then it's a something that's valuable. So you make it. It's really an
Hmm.
option when there's no other options, is what I'm getting.
Well, like that's the thing. Like like same thing. Like me and my girlfriend are moving in together.
Yep.
We were looking at like different places. Buying our own single family house or doing this and that. And it's like I could, but at the same time, it's like what, you know, like the relationships get serious. Got to start saving some money. I got to start paying some stuff down.
Mhm.
I don't have a problem living in a duplex for another couple of years.
Yeah. Well, it's
So
yours.
it's like, yeah. So sometimes it just comes down to your personal preference.
Right, 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 right.
You know.
I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah.
So, like we were saying though, well, when you're building these properties, new construction, sometimes things come
Mhm.
up, and like you don't know how much it's going to cost you, right? So, you know, these things could be expensive, more expensive than just
Yes.
buying something, you know, that's on the market, maybe even if it's not
Mhm.
really what you wanted, you know?
Correct.
So I'm
Yep.
thinking like, what happens? What's your options or what's the
Aha.
thought process? Because listen, I've heard these horror stories, but
It happens. No, no, no.
listen,
It happens. It's happened to me.
out of
Okay.
all the people that I've spoken to,
Yeah.
you've been able to give me like clarity and
I believe
knowledge
it.
and
I
wherewithal, just understanding how to go through these situations in total. So give me your thought process on, God
Mhm.
forbid, what happens if or when the money dries up in these situations.
Okay. So first things first, right? Project's always going to go over budget. Rule number one. Okay. It's always going to
Always,
go over
every
budget,
time.
and it's always going to take longer than unless if you hit a miracle, right?
I got to be working
So,
with you.
but at the end of the day, right? Because because again, you can't plan anything. All of the renovation loans and then the new construction loans, one of the line items is going to be they're going to make you put in a reserve or a contingency fund, right?
Right.
Depending on the price, like the dollar amount of the project,
Yeah.
it's going to be a certain amount, right? Like with the and also if when it comes to the renovation loans, right, like the 203K and the home style, a lot of times it'll be anywhere from like 10 to 15% of the total budget. they'll
Mm.
make you they'll make you
Put in
put
reserve.
off to the side on top of it, right? In case you like, so if the utilities are on, it's 10%, right? So if you got a, let's say you're doing an $80,000 renovation, utilities are on, $8,000 worth of, reserves are going to have to be tacked onto the construction loan. And then
Yeah.
if you don't use that, right? So let's just say you come in on budget, right? What would happen is that any money that's left over would get put down onto the principal. So let's just say you bought a house for 160 or something like that, or let's just make it easy numbers. You bought it for 150, you took out, 100, 100,000 dollars, for your renovation loan. So basically you took out a $250,000 loan. Now let's say you get to the end and you got 8 grand left over in the reserve account
Hmm.
because you did great. You wouldn't get that money, right? Like you're not going to put that money on the side. What's going to happen is at the end, you're going to pay off the bank's going to pay the contractor off at the end. He's going to sign everything. He's going to say it's done. You're going to sign it, say it's done. The bank's going to send their inspectors out because there's draws. They're not just going to say, hey, here you go. Here's, a couple $100,000 to, give to the contractor and tell you what it's done. So they're going to come out like, depending on, a lot of times it's like 4, 5, 6 draws,
Okay.
for each stage. The demo's done. They'll come out, the bank will inspect it, cut them a check. The rough electrical and plumbing and everything's done. They'll come out, take pictures, cut them a check, right? Till we get to the end.
Gotcha.
And then what's going to happen is, let's just say you got the money left over and you have a $250,000 mortgage. You got 8 grand left over from the reserve account. What'll
Hmm.
happen is it'll automatically pay down your principal. So you only have a $242,000 mortgage,
Okay.
if
That
that makes sense.
that makes
So
good.
now at the same time, if you run out of money and you blow through the contingency, then you get into what's considered a loan modification. Okay. Now, depending on what kind of loans you're dealing with, if you're dealing with a 203K loan, a lot of times, all that stuff, I always recommend in the beginning doing a renovation loan, unless if you're, 100% ready to jump into the construction loans. Because with the 203K loans, there's a lot set in there so that you can't get taken advantage of as a buyer,
Right.
right? So usually what ends up happening is the contractor is going to come in, he's going to create what's called a scope of work, which is basically his bid and his estimate. And he's
Yep.
going to itemize all of it, break it down into labor and materials. Now, most of the time, if he puts down that it's going to cost him $200,000 to fix the house, that's what he's got. That's what the bank's paying him.
Hmm.
Like if it cost him, $230,000, he's losing 30 grand.
Mm.
and he's not going to be happy about it. That's also why there's a stigma, and you're seeing a lot of contractors overquote right now, because with a lot of different types of financing, they're held to their word. And when you got materials going up and down, sometimes there are things where you can maybe modify the loan amount and everything, but it's very, very tricky, especially if somebody's like if you're only qualified for 300,000, and you're at the top of your price range, you can't exactly get approved for more money.
Right. Right.
So that's where a lot of times with these, that's why you do everything up front. And when the contractor, for the most part, signs it.
He
Now, if
has
you
to know.
add stuff, right? Like if you add, no, now let's say you add stuff, right?
That's
Like
different.
let's just say you open up a wall and you find out that a wall's rotten, right? Like he didn't know that, you didn't know that. He's not going to eat that, right? That's where there's stuff where you can go in, and a lot of times you get a little modification or stuff like that. There are, you want to try not to do that, but
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So now,
Yeah.
like I've predominantly used a lot of hard money after this, which is basically like commercial, like loan shark money. That
Yeah.
is a completely different deal, and those work same thing. Like you get a mod at the end, but again, they can tell you no, and then you got to figure it out. You either got to borrow money and or sell the property to make everything whole. So, but that is definitely, I do not recommend that for you know anybody that's just getting started.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
more for like flippers and stuff like that.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Well, man, as usual, you're giving me a
mhm.
lot of knowledge, and I appreciate you. Um,
Anytime, man.
yeah, I know, and I do. I always hit you up.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I'm not gonna take too much more of your time. I appreciate you, and I'm gonna let you get going. We'll do this again
Hey,
sometime soon on a different
mhm.
topic. We'll see what's up, man. I'll keep on picking your brain.
I was gonna say, man, I just don't do new construction. I do a lot of other things.
I
So
know. I wanted to start somewhere with you though. You're obviously
exactly.
you're at the new place,
Mhm.
so you
Yeah.
know, just wanted to send some good energy, man. I appreciate you, and
Mhm.
keep
Oh,
up the good work.
before I forget, right?
What's
Before I forget, another good option
uh-huh.
would be, and I actually did it on my first new construction house,
What's
is
that?
actually looking up modular construction. Are you familiar with modular construction?
Heard of it? Heard of it? Tell me more.
So modular construction, and I'll make this real quick, is where they build the house in a factory in
Oh
sections,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then yep, they build the whole house, like in like
That's getting
seven
kind of big
days.
now. That's getting kind
Yeah,
of big.
and I'll be honest with you, I think it's gonna make a comeback for certain things. And the thing that's cool right now, mine was a little bit of a different experience because I basically had them build the house
Yeah.
and then ship it out, and then I had to finish it,
Okay.
right? Because I was doing because I had numbers that I had to hit, so I was trying to come in at certain numbers. But if you just have them do the whole thing, that's probably the easiest way instead of going to find a regular contractor now.
Yeah.
Is you can go to like I used Westchester Modular Homes out of Wingdale, New York, right over the border,
Yep. Yep.
in New York. And like I said, they can design the whole thing. They have everything in house. Like that's honestly how I did my first new construction on training wheels. And they kind of walked me through it. They've got all the teams. You can do as much as you want or as little as you want, right? They could do the whole thing, and like they're you don't have to go to that one.
Time
But
frame.
what they'll it's much quicker, right? Like a lot of times, like you figure, you obviously you got to break ground, right? So a lot of times you got to put a deposit down, which the bank's going to do on your behalf.
Yep.
And it's usually like 60 days, right? Now in that 60 days, well, they're, basically getting the lumber all set up. You got your time in line, all that kind of stuff. To actually build your house takes like, once it gets to the factory and they pull your ticket, they build the whole house in like 7 days. It's crazy, right? Now, again, when I say build the house, they're putting the sheetrock in, they're putting the electrical in, they're doing the siding, the windows. They can put cabinets in it and stuff like that, right? But they're not going to put any flooring in. It's going to come in white. Like the walls are going to be white. That's it, right? You're going to have like a couple different siding colors of the roof, right? And then they're going to come while they're doing that. Either they're going to do it for you, or you have to hire another contractor to build the foundation.